Welcome to Talking School Sports. I'm Neil Rollings. I'm delighted to be joined by Cath Bishop, world champion, Olympic medalist, former diplomat and lecturer at Cambridge University. And Cath's just written a book called The Long Win on investigating what winning means. It seems quite curious, Cath, for someone who spent all their life in pursuit of gold medals at considerable personal cost, I'm sure, to question the validity of winning. So what inspired you to write it?
Thanks, Neil. Good to be here. So the book is really me trying to make sense of those ferociously intense experiences and actually trying to wonder, what's the why, and what did it bring me, and actually to think about how can I influence and be part of the debate about the performance environments we set up for others. So I think there were definitely things that helped me to perform, and there were things in that environment that got in the way, and I wanted to understand what that was so that I could, again, with whether it's in the leadership development work I do or talking to schools, talking to businesses, really help dispel some of the myths about what success looks like and to redefine what success might mean in the future.
So to take the title of your first chapter, what does winning mean?
So that's the whole exploration of the book and the last 10 years or more than that. When I started off as an Olympic athlete, I thought it was really clear. I thought it was all about medals. How could it be anything else? It's sport. It's really simple. That's why we love it. But actually the experience of 10 years in the Olympic rowing team taught me that it is so much more than that. And it needs to be more than that as well. That the experience of every day when nobody's winning a medal on a daily basis, does that mean that day doesn't matter? Does that mean that day doesn't have sort of meaning for what happens thereafter? That's nonsense. So for me, it was about broadening that sense of success, bringing it into the everyday and taking it beyond the medal. One of the things that really sort of has shocked me is seeing how many athletes that win medals, even the gold medal, you find themselves depressed, empty, thinking, is that it? And falling off a bit of a cliff after that point as well. So that's not a picture of success that I recognise, that I think we want to hold up to young people as what they should be aiming for. And that shows me that something has gone wrong by us defining winning so narrowly that it's a moment in time as you cross the line or as you stand on the podium. That moment in time needs to be connected to what happens before and what happens afterwards. So for me, winning cannot be just a momentary point where you hit your targets, get your school grades, or cross the line first, second, third, or wherever you cross. That moment must be tied to the bigger story of the journey you're on, the experience you've had, and what you take from that into what comes afterwards. So we don't have this sort of phenomenon of, we've climbed Everest, but we drop, we fall on the way down. That's kind of pointless, isn't it? We need to make sure that those moments, the results we get, whatever they are, give us something for whatever comes next in our lives, whether it's another race or whether it's the next phase in our lives.
And so is it possible to win all those days, all those training days along the way to big time? Can you win every day, or is it only on the race day?
So for me, I think we need to redefine success. Absolutely, every day we should be taking something from it. It doesn't mean that everything goes right or that everything is completely positive. But if we have much more of a learning mindset, then every day gives us something that we take with us into the next day. I think 2020 has shown us more than ever that results can be wiped away. There is no competition in 2020 for an Olympic athlete. Does that mean that this year is a total waste of time, that they cannot be successful as athletes? Well, I really hope that isn't the case. I mean, I've definitely seen in the sort of athletes that I've come across, the ones who have a very narrow view of it's all about the Tokyo medal, then, they've immediately lost a lot of motivation and it's been a huge struggle. Whereas athletes who had a kind of broader sense of why they're on the sporting journey have been able to adapt, have been able to think, well, what can I use this time to do? Either an area of sporting development that they never had time to focus on, or actually thinking about, okay, how can I now invest in something else that will support my life after sport? So, having the broader success criteria enables us to take something positive from each day, because do you know what? That medal day might not come. We can't control that.
And were you aware of that on all of those days breaking the ice on the water at 6 a.m, or did that realization only come to you after you had the medal hanging around your neck?
So it actually came to me after my kind of biggest failure. So certainly not in the early years. I was in a, win at all costs, don't have any, I was told don't enjoy yourself until you get on the podium. That's when you can enjoy yourself, when you're on top stuff of the podium, which I think is a really dangerous thing to say to any athlete. The idea that you can't take joy from what you're doing along the way. And when my second Olympics came ninth, it was a terrible, catastrophic result for the potential, the physiological potential I had, and for some of the results that I'd seen during the Olympiad. Then I hit a real crisis point. And, I'd totally fallen out in love with the sport. My own levels of self-belief were, just had gone through the floor. I was in a terrible place. And that really made me sort of stop and think about, why am I doing this? Why did I go through that? And is it right to be feeling like this after you've competed and given your all at an Olympic Games? And that was really what started me on the journey of thinking about the long win, about redefining how we approach sport, but also performance in other parts of our lives. And when I went back for a third time, then I went with quite a different mindset. I knew this time, for a start, I had to think, do you know what? It's possible I could come ninth again, and I need to be okay with that. Before I demonized it, it had felt a really negative thing. You must hate losing. You must be really miserable if you lose. But I knew that actually somebody could come ninth and be incredibly committed and be totally tough day in, day out and train as hard as they could. I knew that those sorts of athletes also came ninth. And that actually made me think very differently about what I was going back for. Yes, of course, I still wanted to win if I could. I wanted to explore my potential and see how fast I could go. But I also went back with a mission to see what I could gain from each day along the way. I mean, I didn't know when I went back for the third Olympics whether I'd get selected or not. So again, I wanted to feel, what can I take from each day that will help me in my life afterwards? What will I take from the way that I connect with people, the things I can learn from them, the things I can learn about myself, about my mindset, about how I behave, about how I look after myself, about how I recover, all of those aspects. How can I take something that will last beyond any possible potential podium moment that may or may not come?
And do you think the structures of elite sport recognise that, or do they focus on the podium and anyone who's not on the podium can't be a winner?
So I think we're in a bit of a transition moment. I hope we're in a transition moment. I think we've seen, an overwhelming number of athletes struggle post-Olympics, regardless of results. I think we've seen that we have got very good at winning medals, and we have a system that has allowed us to do that, but it has come at a cost, where welfare of athletes has not been a priority. And I think we can see that it's time to shift. Now, of course, that's going to take some time. And, that there are still different lines of thinking about, I guess, the purpose of sport in the slightly longer term. But I think crises of athlete retention and the pipeline of attracting the next generation are really important factors in making us understand that we do need to shift the philosophy of high performance systems, that they can be done another way also, that we don't need to be punishing athletes, if you like, for performance to be based on fear rather than on a much more kind of positive basis. So I think we are at a transition, and some sports are, more open. Often some of the newer sports where actually they haven't been as successful, haven't been sort of as struck by the kind of desperation of gold medals is what it's all about, and have been able to actually take on some shifts in their culture and be open to different expertise in setting up a different environment. And actually some of our traditional successful sports have found it much harder, because that's what they've made their name on, that's what their identity is. And I think it will take a longer time to shift. But for the longevity of athletes in the future, and to make greater links to participation, which has got to be crucial. And for me, it's been a massive failure that we have separated the elite side from the participation to such an enormous extent. Then we need to shift.
What would have to happen then to dilute some of that obsessiveness?
It requires definitely a shift in philosophy. We have to understand the purpose as not being about winning. we have to understand the purpose of sport being about the experience that we have, the connection with others, the opportunity to explore potential. And of course, performance is part of that, results are part of that, but they are a part of it. They are not the full picture. So we need to set the competitions, if you like, the results within a framework. At the moment, they just sort of are out there on their own. It's results or nothing. Whereas I think if we can set competition within a much broader framework of why we're doing it, the social responsibility that athletes have, the influence they have beyond just a single moment crossing a line. Actually, we've seen the platform that some athletes have taken this year. Marcus Rashford is the model of that, if you like, how you can reach out and actually achieve something that has a lasting effect than simply being a hero on one day when you cross the line.
So what do you say to people who say that's all very pink and fluffy, Kath, but if we do that, we won't be winning medals anymore, and look how many medals have been won, and it's necessary to push athletes to the verge of destruction in order to win those medals?
So I think pushing athletes is fine, but I think we need to think about actually how do we ensure that athletes can have the careers that enable them to reach their potential. There are many athletes at the moment in a system who will be broken and who won't even be winning medals because they've been chucked out along the way, they've been overtrained, or they have been pushed to that point of destruction. So that's not success for me either. I think we need to think about whether we have got, good talent coming through and the opportunity to get a range of people coming into our sporting environments, not just attracting those who are kind of up for spending years of their life in a very kind of macho, unsupportive environment. So I think we turn a lot of talent away because they do not want to choose to spend that much of their lives in these environments. So I think we should be exploring that. I think we have a responsibility that the athletes after their competitions shouldn't be broken for the rest of their lives. That's also causing us a challenge in society when we have to manage that, when you have 50% of people with mental health issues, as came out in the BBC State of Sport survey a couple of years ago. So I don't see how that's successful. I don't see how that's showing us a way of operating that we would accept in schools, that we would accept in organizations, that brings us anything other than short-term success at the cost of long-term success. So I don't think we can keep this going even if we wanted to, because we've done the experiment and we've seen the costs. It's not acceptable to have an athlete like we had recently, the gymnast Amy Tinkler, say she would hand back her medal if she could change the experiences she had along the way. How is that holding up an inspirational story for the next generation? And how is that accepting values that we are all comfortable with? We wouldn't run a school on that basis. We shouldn't be running sport on that basis either. So it's really important that we kind of set those values back and enable us, to win medals that have a value rather than medals for the sake of medals. I think the stories that we attach to them are important. The stories that athletes tell are as important as that medal, i.e. if it's come at the cost of abuse, it's not acceptable. How can that be a picture of glory, a story that we want to tell and inspire others with? So we need to understand what goes behind it. What's the meaning that comes with the medal?
And despite your catalogue of successes in sport, you didn't start with success in sport when you were at school, did you? Can you tell us a bit about your introduction to sport?
Yeah, I had quite a negative experience at school. I think I was very tall and uncoordinated, and I wasn't a fast runner. I mean, I'm a tall person, and there was a sort of very much a stereotype that the sporty ones were the ones who were coordinated and could run fast. And if you didn't make that, again, I was quite young for my year, and that meant probably also that I was behind in a developmental sense. And there was never any scope that was okay. No, that was the weakness. It wasn't good enough. And I was therefore firmly categorized not sporty. And I still have the school reports to prove it, which I think also makes me very passionate about us not boxing people in, not categorizing who's sporty, who isn't. This goes beyond sport in other subjects as well. We will all develop at a different pace. It's not a linear pace, and we shouldn't really be ranking and comparing people either, because that also will mean that we kind of dismiss talent and exclude people from sport. So I am so lucky that I had a wonderful introduction to rowing at university, and one that came without any attachment to performance, came without any attachment to wanting to be an Olympian or anything like that. So it actually enabled me to really fall in love with being in a boat, on the water with friends, having fun, exploring how fast we could go, absolutely, testing ourselves, pushing ourselves, for the joy of seeing how fast we could go in the boat and the feeling of being on the river each morning. So, you know, that was something that then enabled me later to cope with a much higher pressure performance environment, because I had actually joined the sport because I fell in love with it.
And so, do you think schools could inspire that love of sport amongst people, or is it a post-teenage years realization?
No, I mean, I could easily have fallen through the net and never found sport. It was really very by chance that I did. So I absolutely think it's far more important that we focus on a range of opportunities in sport for children, and not a sense of it matters how good you are. Sport, healthy activity should be something that we are introducing and ensuring that all kids can feel included in and not excluded from. Again, we see the terrible social costs that come from children leaving school without an attitude of wanting to live a healthy life. That is far more important than, frankly, any school fixture or league table result along the way, because that's about quality of life, you know, ongoing afterwards. And I think that's what schools should be setting the foundations for. And, you know, it'd be, in a way, you know, I'd love them to have the measure of how many people can they keep in sport in 10 years time, in 20 years time, in 30 years time. I'd love there to be a schools league table about that, rather than who's won the latest local kind of round of fixtures.
How would schools have to operate sport differently to achieve that, do you think?
Again, it comes about setting your objectives, your purpose. What are we trying to achieve this year? And that means some very different metrics, from simply, again, the fixture list, from simply the results. I mean, we should absolutely be aiming for pursuing what's possible, for pursuing excellence. I'm not about lowering standards, but I am about making sure the framework in which we approach performance is a much broader and better supported one. So I think it is about, you know, necessarily exploring the experience. Do you know at the moment what the experience of kids having sport is in your schools? If not, how do you find out? It's a very different type of feedback that we need to understand, and then to think about, okay, what would improve that? Actually, how can we challenge children in different ways through different activities, through a breadth of whatever's possible within your school? And we look at skill acquisition, we look at testing development, we look at the teamwork aspect, we look at developing a mindset to cope with losing, to have that resilience, to keep trying, and that those are elements of success. The mindset we bring to the sport that we're playing, not the outcome of any single game, and that we shift therefore much more onto, you know, the experience of school sport and why we're doing it, the value of the relationships, the friendships that come through playing sport. Because at its real fundamental level, sport is about connection. That's why we watch it. That's why we take part in it. So actually, let's have that as an aim to the relationships that we make on the sports pitch. Let's think about those. Let's develop those. Let's understand those. Let's understand when communication works in the middle of the match and when it doesn't, not just who won and who lost.
Do you think it's possible to do those things and still be Henley champions, still be national champions, or are they mutually exclusive?
I think they will improve your chances of sustaining performance. We'll never win all the time. So it also seems silly to be putting everything, all our kind of apples in that bag. Why don't we make sure that we have that joy for the sport that will give us a basis then to push ourselves because we want to see what's possible, not because we're afraid of losing. We're shifting motivation to more intrinsic level of why we play sport, the connection we get, that sense of constantly learning, constantly improving. That's the joy of it. And that is actually the best way to achieve high performance. Sports psychology at elite levels now focuses much more on that performance process than the results. everybody else in the sporting environment is still talking about the results. But the way an athlete performs is by not thinking about the results. When an athlete is in the zone, they are absolutely detached from the results and fully absorbed in the moment that they're in. So all of our performance lessons that come through psychology, through the sports scientists, show us that it's important to let go of the outcome and to think about maximizing the moment you're in. So there is every performance reason as well to shift our approach.
Kath, thanks very much. Delightful speaking to you. Thank you very much.
Great to be here. Thank you.